Well, on the line now we have Mark Cutifani, who's the Chief Executive of Anglo American, and it's an appropriate time, Mark, for you to join us, given that we've had the platinum strike, we've had concerns all around the world about the mining sector in South Africa, most recently with BHP Billiton spinning off Spinco, as I think most people are terming it, with the South African assets in it. Any plans to do the same from Anglo's side?
Hi, Alex. Apart from the announcements we've made on platinum and some of the smaller scale assets across the portfolio, and that includes assets outside of South Africa, no, we don't have any plans to create two different entities. We want to stay where we are. We're a diversified group. We've got great potential, and we see South Africa as absolutely critical to our future.
Is that absolutely critical? What percentage of your revenues are, well, let's say profits rather, are generated from this part of the world?
Well, we proudly say, Alex, that we're at about 50% of our earnings come from South Africa. We've got about 30% of our capital deployed here, and we would say that South Africa is punching well above its weight, and we're very proud of that achievement.
Your view about the way things are going, though, in this country, 5 months of platinum strike has to give you pause for thought.
Well, it is a concern. I think it's more associated with the specific issues in platinum. I wouldn't say it's a more general South African issue, but I do think productivity is a critical issue for us in South Africa, but it is in many other jurisdictions. So, yes, it's a concern. It's one we have to deal with, but none of our jurisdictions are without concern.
What about the economic policies and regulations in place, like the MPRDA in SA, which could be a threat?
Well, I think the engagement that we've had in the last 12 months on the MPRDA has been constructive. There are certain elements that I've said I don't agree with on the MPRDA. Obviously, the oil and gas sector provisions are a concern, and there's a couple of other things in the MPRDA that make it a bit more difficult, but we did negotiate in a very open way with the government, and the outcomes that we landed on were agreed. But I do welcome the Minister's thoughtful response when asked in looking at those areas where there may be some tension, and we're going to remain a positive contributor. But overall, I think the document is a pretty solid document and one that we can work with.
There's a wonderful saying that you should never never lose the advantages of a good crisis. Now, there's been enough crises in the mining sector in South Africa to last a lifetime. If you look ahead, maybe 3 to 5 years, what do you think is going to change so that we won't go back into these kind of situations?
I think as an industry, the most important thing for us to do is engage in a more real way with governments, with local communities, and with our employees. At the end of the day, there are all sorts of forces involved in the platinum strike, but the one thing that we can do better as management is build a better relationship with our employees. And I think we have to take full accountability for that relationship and make a difference. So the things I can impact or we can impact as a group, one, engage with our employees. Two, and I think we're doing that through the MPRDA, negotiate in a real way with the government to make sure we've got a good outcome. And three, do a much better job in our local communities. And that's one I think we've all got to do much better on.
On the topic of engagement, when was your last visit, site visit to one of your mines here in SA?
Sorry, I missed that question.
On the topic of engagement, when was your last visit to one of your operations here in South Africa?
About 4 weeks ago, I actually visited the platinum operations. I went to the refinery, the smelter. I've also visited Batapele a few weeks before that. So I visit a mine about once every 6 weeks.
And that's, I suppose that's the way that it is going to be in future, Mark. We've had the Steve Kearney playbook, if you like, the way that he transformed Impala going back over a decade. That seemed to get forgotten about. And unions got in between management and the workers. Is that going to be perhaps a thrust in the future, where the managers get a bit closer to the workers?
Well, I think the most important thing is that we have to establish a dialogue with every individual in the business. That means we have to take responsibility for that relationship. So the answer is yes, but at the same time, we have to respect the unions as the elected representatives of the workforce. And so we've just got to get that balance in that conversation, I think, a lot better than we've had in the more recent past.
Is it more difficult operating in South Africa than in other geographies where you are present?
Some it's more complicated, some it's easier. I think it sits in the middle of the pack, but I have gone on record as saying that I think South Africa remains one of the better jurisdictions in the world. It's a long history of mining. There's a culture of mining in the country. They do understand what's required, but at the same time, we're working with, in the last 20 years, legacy issues that go back more than 100 years. So that certainly adds some complications, but there are a lot of positives in South Africa that balance that.
What about platinum? Much confusion here. Some years ago, Anglo was edging up its share in Anglo American platinum. Now you're hiving off some of the mines. Is there still the potential that you are going to take out Anglo Platinum or the quality mines that are left? What are you thinking generally?
Well, firstly, the most important thing we've said to our key stakeholders is we want to remain a shareholder of Anglo Plats. We are obviously the majority shareholder, so we've got no plans to increase our holding at this stage. That's point one. And I think from the government's point of view, that's an important point to see the company remain a listed entity in the JSE. Secondly, we're not so much interested in market share. We're more interested in returns on capital and making sure that we're working to the potential in the business. And I think, we've shifted from a volume strategy to a quality strategy. And I think that's a really important shift. And what we've been very clear on is that we would not support additional capital going into assets that have got tighter margins compared to other assets that we've got in the portfolio. So we've made a very conscious decision to focus on those assets, and then, to be fair to employees in the country, to give someone else the opportunity to do better with those assets that we've struggled a little bit with.
Capital allocation.
Absolutely.
Mark Cutifani, Chief Executive of Anglo American, rather.